There is a house I want you to walk into. The kitchen has food from both countries in it. There's a word from her language that everyone in the family uses, including the dog. There is a holiday from his calendar on the wall in photographs every single year. From the outside, this is the good version. This is what it's supposed to look like. Now, let me ask 6 questions about that house. What language do they argue in? Whose parents get called when something goes wrong? Whose idea of a reasonable amount of money to send home is the one they actually use? When her mother comes to stay for 3 months, whose definition of 3 months runs the house? And when they disagree about the children, whose instinct is the default and whose instinct is the one that has to be explained and defended? And over 10 years, who changed more? Same answer, 6 times. The same person. And nobody in that house ever decided that. There was never a meeting. One culture is really running the house. The other culture is decorating it. And there's a word for this. I've been showing it to you for a month without saying it out loud. The word is costume. For the last month, this channel's been running a series called Borrowed. What happens to an idea when it crosses a border? Ideas like karma and mindfulness and ikigai. Every one of those episodes was the same episode. A culture reaches across, takes what is useful, leaves the structure behind, and calls the result shared. But nobody was scheming. Everybody was sincere. But costume is one of the first of 5 ways cross-building fails. The others are autopilot, erasure, fantasy, and collapse. I'll get to all of them, but costume is the most common one. It's also the hardest one to see from inside, and it's almost never any bad intentions. And that last part is really what this video's about. I'm not going to let you forget it. Here's the definition. Costume is when one culture runs the operating system and the other culture supplies the decoration. The surface is mixed, but the structure is not. Nothing was shared, but something was borrowed. And here's the test. I'm going to hand it to you 3 times before we finish because it's the only thing from today you actually need. It's not what you display, it's what you gave up. All right, so we're looking at 3 cases today, and all 3 are composites, built out of patterns I've watched many times in many places, including my own house. They're not any one real family, company, or congregation, and so I'll say so every time. And alongside them, documented ones, including a study of churches where the black members were the majority and the church still ran on white values. And a man who wrote one of the best known cross-cultural gestures in North America, then went on to national radio and said he regretted it. So let's start with the house. This is case 1, the couple. And go back to those 6 questions and 6 answers and 1 name. The person whose culture is in the walls didn't seize anything. He's a kind guy. He learned the recipes. He goes to the family holidays and he means it. And the person whose culture is on the walls knows. She may not have the word and she may have never said it out loud, but she knows. Because the second she says anything, the evidence comes out. We cook your food, your holidays on your wall, your language is in this house, your mother's welcome here. Pretty much whenever she wants, what more do you want? Well, what she wants is for her culture to get a vote on something that costs him something. That's the loneliest position in this entire framework. And if you're sitting in it, I want to say one thing to you directly. You're not imagining it. All right, case 2. This is the company. The founder is from 1 country and the team is from 4. And there's a channel in the company chat for everybody's holidays. There's food, there's a slide in the onboarding deck about valuing different perspectives, and none of that's fake. Now, ask the other questions. What time are the meetings? Whose morning is that? What counts as a good employee? Someone who pushes back in the meeting or someone who doesn't embarrass their manager in front of other people? Those are both real definitions of a good employee. They just come from different systems. But only one of them's written down in this company. Who got promoted last? Look at the last 5. Whose English is correct English? And the deepest one. When somebody's struggling, does the company ask what's wrong with them, or does it ask whether the system is legible to them? Costume in a workplace doesn't look like exclusion. It looks like inclusion with the structure untouched. The holidays are on the calendar, the powers table. Here's that same shape documented at enormous scale. In 2016, most of the world's major humanitarian donors and agencies signed something called the Grand Bargain. One commitment. At least 25% of humanitarian funding would go to local and national responders as directly as possible by 2020. The vocabulary of the entire sector changed. Local leadership, local led, as local as possible, as international as necessary. And by 2020, independent counts put the money going directly to local and national organizations at about 3.5%. An assessment published this year still puts it under 4. So I want to be fair here. The counting is contested. Nobody agrees on who is local. In an emergency, speed is more of a moral argument, and it's faster to move large sums through large organizations. And some of the people pushing the damning numbers work inside the system. All that's true. And the pattern is still the pattern. The vocabulary was adopted completely. The authority was not. Now, before this starts to sound like a story about Western people doing this to everybody else, it's not. In 1994, an American consultant named Rochelle Kopp published a book about what happens inside the overseas offices of Japanese companies. She called what she found the rice paper ceiling. Local staff discover that the roles that decide anything stay with the people sent from the headquarters. Local hires get left out of the management training, left out of the pipeline that leads anywhere. Kopp wrote about Americans and Japanese firms in the United States. Researchers have since found the same shape in Japanese subsidiaries in Europe and in China. The term's been in the academic literature for 30 years. Kopp didn't write it as an attack. She wrote it as bridge building. The literature says Japanese firms have been trying to move toward local leadership and that the shift has been slow. But look at the shape. An office in another country, staffed by people from that country, running on an operating system that never left home. That's costume. And the culture in the driver's seat is not Western. Any culture with more power does this. Costume's not a Western habit. It's what happens to whichever culture has more room. All right, case 3, the congregation. A congregation that was one culture for a very long time, then it changed. Now, there's a gospel choir or a worship team singing in 3 languages. The room sounds different, and everybody feels good about it, but ask, who's on the board? Who preaches? Who decides what money does? How long is the service, and who decided that? And when someone responds out loud the way their tradition responds out loud, does the room settle around them, or does the room stiffen a bit? The sociologist Corey Little Edwards studied this. Her book is called The Elusive Dream. She combined national survey data with a deep study of one multiracial congregation. And what she found is the thing I couldn't stop thinking about. The churches didn't even become a mix of 2 ways of worshiping. They ran on white norms, and that held even in congregations where black members were the majority. Behavior that white members read as a bit too much was experienced by black members as being asked to hold themselves in, and the adjusting was done by the people with less power in the room. And her thesis, put plainly, these churches hold together to the degree they stay comfortable for the white members. Edwards is careful, so I also need to be careful. Her deep case had been a white church for 6 decades before it diversified. A reviewer asked fairly whether the finding travels beyond the black and white pairing in the United States. Those are real limits, so I'm naming them. Now, the piece that matters most. Another sociologist, Gerardo Marti, went looking for the formula, and he interviewed more than 170 congregational leaders and members across multiracial Protestant churches in Southern California, and he started with the assumption that the music was the lever. Pick the right songs and the congregation diversifies. He found that wasn't true. There's no style of music that produces a multiracial church. He found something worse. Congregations felt pressure to have visible diversity on the platform. He called it a demand for conspicuous color, recruiting people to be seen. But Marty did find where the real thing happens. Not in the performance, but in the preparation. The hours away from the service that nobody watches. You can't add the music and get the thing. You have to do the work the music is made out of. Which brings me to the man who built one and then said so. In 2012, Hayden King, an Anishinaabe writer and educator, helped to write the territorial acknowledgement for Ryerson University in Toronto. The school is now called Toronto Metropolitan University. A land acknowledgement is a statement read at the start of an event, naming the Indigenous nations whose territory the event is taking place on. In Canada, they are everywhere. Universities and conferences, even hockey games. In 2019, King went on national radio and said he regretted writing it. Not because acknowledging the territory is wrong, but because what the acknowledgement became. He said that they wrote it under pressure. And he said that as it spread, he watched it become superficial. He said a lot of them end up violating settler presence while obscuring Indigenous politics. He used the phrase token gesture, and he said what would repair it. Put an obligation on the back end. Say whose territory this is, and then say what that requires of you. He suggested universities commit to admitting and recruiting First Nations students and faculties, a number, a budget, a cost. So think about what happened there. A man from the culture being honored wrote the honoring. Everyone involved was sincere, nobody was scheming, and a decade later, the person who built it looked at what it had become and told an entire country he regretted it. That's costume, not malice. Sincerity that never had to pay for anything. So let me pull this all the way up. 3 things define costume. First, the surface is mixed and the structure is not. The visible things are shared. The invisible things belong to one side. Second, the borrowed elements cost the dominant culture nothing. A song is free, a dish is free, a word is free, a statement read at the start of a meeting is free, but authority is not free. Time's not free. Money's not free. Whose parents get the emergency call is not free. A third, it's sincere, almost always, which is why I'm not arguing that one person is right and one's wrong. So why is it the most common failure? Well, because it's what happens when nobody does anything. If 2 cultures meet and nobody does the deliberate work, the one with more power supplies the structure by default. Not because it won an argument, because nobody had the argument. Costume's what a mixed room turns into when it's left alone. So why is it so hard to see from inside? Well, there's 2 reasons running in opposite directions. If you are the culture in the driver's seat, you can't see it because your culture doesn't look like culture to you. It looks like how things are just done. It looks like normal. It looks like common sense. That's the first prerequisite of cross-building, and it's the one most people never do. Until you could hold your own way as one option among several, you can't build with anybody. You could only absorb them. And if you are the culture supplying the decoration, you could see it perfectly. You often cannot say it because all the evidence is against you and everyone is being kind. So what separates costume from an actual cross-build? A cross-build culture is a shared culture that people from different backgrounds construct on purpose, in which both original cultures stay fully intact and something new comes into existence that belongs to everyone who built it. Costume fails 4 tests all at once. It wasn't intentional. It happened just by default. Both cultures didn't stay intact, and one is in the walls and one is on the walls. Nothing new was created. An existing system got accessories. And the person with more power didn't yield. That's the 4th principle of this framework, and costume breaks it every single time. The person with more power has to yield more, not out of guilt, but because they have more room to move. So here's the question. One question. Carry it into your house or your team or your congregation this week. What has the more powerful culture actually given up? Not added, but given up. If the answer is a song or a dish or a word or some statement, then what you have is costume. That's not a verdict on you, it's more of a diagnosis. And diagnosis is where repair starts. If the answer is a decision or a budget or a piece of authority, a default that got changed and stayed changed, then something is being built. Let me tell you why I'm so sure this is the most common one. Because I keep finding it in my own life. I've lived in 3 countries. I run companies here in the Philippines. I host dinner series in Manila and Cebu City that exist for exactly this reason. And I could catch myself running my own defaults and calling it collaboration. I still catch the moment where someone adjusts to me and I let them because it's easier and because I'm busy and because nobody made me look at it. So costume's not something bad people do to good people. It's what happens to good people who never had to notice. Now you have the work. Look at what you've added, then look at what it cost you. And the distance between those 2 is the whole thing. My name is John. This is Crossbuilt. Next time, we'll look into the second failure mode, autopilot, what happens when 2 cultures share a house for 15 years and never combine at all. Take care.